Blocking presses were invented in the second half of the 19th century. Combined with the cased book, these made possible the elaborately decorated covers that late Victorian cloth-bound books are famous for. A brass die was made for the cover and the design was stamped as a whole. There may have been multiple dies for different colours, and the front, back and spine may have been done separately. But it was a huge step forward from finishing by hand and building up designs from single tools. Electricity for domestic and industrial use was only just becoming a thing about the same time, and for heat or energy-intensive applications such as the heated blocking press, gas made a lot of sense. Electricity is much more convenient and may be safer, and once it was practical, most new blocking presses were made with electric heating elements. Many of the older gas-fired ones were converted to electricity, and I have an older Krauser that was originally gas and was converted. Very few of these older gas-fired blocking presses remain, and very few of the ones that do are still configured to run on gas, and even less of these are still in a state to run. I'm sure there are a few around, but this is the only one I know of still operating. Please let me know of any others. I love museums, but static objects in museums only preserve a fraction of their history. Many objects, especially complex machines, are more than their components. How the components work together, how the machine runs and operates, is a part of the object too. And how a human uses a machine, how it was used and maintained, is a massive part of its history. The only way these other aspects of an object can be preserved is for the machine to run, and for people to learn in an unbroken chain of knowledge how to operate and maintain the machine. This is when you find out an object isn't complete unless you have the specialty maintenance tools and materials needed to make it live. The most striking examples of this are some of the complex printing presses and typecasting machines. A linotype is just a lump of rust waiting to form unless it's kept running. My goal is to preserve historic bookbinding tools and machines in a working environment. The problem with working environments is that machines are often adapted and modified to suit changing requirements. This blocking press has at least one significant modification, which my original plan was to reverse, but in the end I kept. I want this machine to be a productive part of my bindery while preserving history. As I restore this press, I'll explain my decisions, which all have pros and cons, and how I make a final call on what work to do and how to do it. Something that makes working on these early blocking presses easier is that they're mechanically simple. With that in mind, I decide it's best to disassemble it so I can work on each component individually. Even if you're not making a YouTube video, taking video of this process can be handy. I take notes, photos and video. Not everything needs to be taken apart for restoration. Some things may never go back together again. Judgment needs to be used before pulling things apart. Books are far too often pulled completely down. I got this press from Doug Keats about a year ago, along with his massive, much more modern electric-powered Marshall. And by modern, I'm guessing 1950s. Doug was retiring for the second time from bookbinding, and he bought most of his then current equipment from a supplier of used printing equipment, and he unfortunately had no earlier history on any of this gear. He said he'd been using this press, but I suspect he hadn't run it in a few years. It was so dirty and the rust so bad that just showing a case to it would get smudges on it, and I hate rust. I don't know how old this press is, but the number on the nameplate is 98/1. I'm taking this to mean it was made in 1898, which fits with the style of press. Hopefully more research will confirm if this assumption is correct. I always tell people to try and preserve any original paint on old nipping presses. Most of them have been repainted, and so preserving any original finish is important for understanding how they were finished originally and what they looked like. I'm sure my nipping press everyone's so familiar with was not hammer-tone green, but there was not a speck of paint on it when I got it. This press has a lot of black paint on it. Many of you will be familiar with more modern Marshall presses, and they're obviously an evolution of this one, and they're nearly always grey. Someone whose knowledge and experience I value has told me he believes that early Marshalls were black, and most late 19th century steel was black, but often using a finish called Japanning. This paint was soft and dull and not like traditional Japanning. My gut feeling is that the paint isn't original, but I'm often wrong. At this point, I decide to move forward with keeping the black paint. When I see fully restored printing presses that look better than when they were new, that are so glossy you can see your reflection in the paint, you can easily get intoxicated with that new car smell feeling. But then you're left with another feeling. What happened to all the signs of use? The nicks and dents from all the craftspeople operating the machine for decades. Sometimes all this has already been lost to rust, and fully repainting isn't erasing anything. But honest wear and tear from use can have its own charm. The final decision was made by the fact that not stripping and repainting was going to save me weeks of work. And if I changed my mind in the future, it was going to be a much faster job if all I was doing was the paint and not also removing rust and doing mechanical repairs. I can always change my mind about not painting, but once I start stripping paint, there's no going back. There is one piece that's an exception, and that's the wheel at the top. I really wanted the rust gone off of this. I didn't want rust on my hands every time I adjusted the height of the chase. This was completely stripped and painted, but with a paint that I think matched the original or existing paint. I used a combination of chemical and mechanical rust removal. Most jobs require a combination of techniques. My favourite commercial rust remover is Evapo-rust, but it is expensive and it doesn't remain effective for many uses. I can get 5 litres for $55 or in bulk of 20 litres for $230, roughly $11 a litre. I recently started using a home-brew rust remover made with citric acid, washing soda and some detergent. I bought 10 kilos of food-grade citric acid for $25, 5 kilos of washing soda for $15 and a $5 bottle of detergent, a total of $45, which made 50 litres of rust remover, which is as fast and effective as Evapo-rust and lasts much longer. $1 a litre versus $11. I don't think I'll be buying Evapo-rust again soon. There's a link in the description to the video where I learnt about this homebrew rust remover. For the painted parts, I sprayed them with my favourite degreaser cleaner, which is currently Kurd Kutter. I start with regular strength, which is usually safe with paint, and if the crud is stubborn, I move to heavy duty, being careful with paint as it often removes the paint. This black paint seemed immune to the extra strength, and the stronger version did a much better job at cleaning the surfaces. I scrubbed everything with a stiff bristle brush and then went over it again with a gentle green Scotch pad. For mechanical rust removal, I used scrapers, hand wire brushes and wire wheels and a cordless drill. I didn't film much of this because it makes a huge mess and the camera always ends up covered in gunk. Everything that goes through chemical rust removal is scrubbed after coming out of the bath, hosed off, very quickly dried first with rags, then compressed air, and then sprayed with WD-40. The WD-40 disperses any remaining water and stops flash rusting. The painted parts I then leave for a few days, in which most of the WD-40 evaporates, and then I rub turtle car wax over everything. Once this is buffed off, this is usually the final finish. I put the wax on the bare metal pieces as well. I find it's a good long-term rust inhibitor. The fancier technical rust inhibitors are very difficult and expensive to get in Australia. Anything I'm going to paint is cleaned with a solvent, usually brake cleaner, and then I usually do 2 coats of primer, then a minimum 2 coats of top coat. A significant modification from original was I decided to paint the firebox, where the gas burners are. Cast metal like this always rusts quickly when heated and cooled, as this part will be. Did I mention I hate rust? I wanted to experiment with high temperature ceramic paint used for engines. The one I bought is rated to 1200 C, much hotter than this press will ever get, but it's not clear if it would withstand direct exposure to flames. I guess there's only one way to find out. It comes with a primer and top coat, and I gave it an extra couple of top coats for good measure. I used the same paint on the top wheel. It had to be cured at temperature, and I didn't think Mrs. Daz would be happy with me putting this greasy hunk of metal in the kitchen oven, so I put it on an electric hot plate that I sometimes use for finishing, and set it at maximum for an hour and a half. When reassembling, I put a small amount of long-life grease on the threads and surfaces that would be hard to get at later. There are oil passages in the frame to lubricate where the shaft goes through the uprights. Luckily, I remembered not to block these with grease. And while the area above the firebox does get very warm, it doesn't get hot enough to bother the grease, certainly not hot enough to smoke. One component that I'm worried about rusting in the future is the chase that slides in under the firebox. It's made of cast metal, maybe iron rather than steel. The metal is a bit porous, maybe not the best cast ever. If I was going to get any part milled flat, it would be the bed of this. I'll mostly use brass type with this press, and it would be nice if the bed of the chase was perfectly flat so I don't have to do much make ready in the future. I seem to have got lucky with the chase. Another chemical rust removal method I use is straight citric acid. Because it's an acid, it does remove some metal. This can be handy if you want a very bright, clean finish after rust removal, but it is more prone to rust again if not painted or treated in some way, and for porous metal it can cause pitting. It also removes paint well, whereas Evapo-rust and the home-brew mix are a bit more paint-friendly, and if you treat a part for as short a time as possible, you can often save much of the paint. This worked for the big wing nut that locks the column once it's adjusted. For some ferrous metals, if you leave them in the Evapo-rust or home-brew longer, they seem to develop a coating of black oxide or magnetite. This is the coating produced in the process called bluing. It's another form of iron oxide, and it's more stable than red rust, and it provides some protection from red rust forming in the future. I deliberately left the chase in the home-brew for 3 days hoping to form this layer, and it may have worked, and time will tell if it provides some rust protection. Just after the 16-minute mark, when I moved the press between rooms, you might notice that the size of the bottom plate gets larger. A previous owner had added a huge plate of steel on top of the original bottom plate to make the working area much larger. They also added screw holes around the edges to fit guides. My original plan was to not refit this plate, and this is why I sort of ignored it and didn't video anything to do with it. But then I decided it was a nice feature and I put it back. In the video, especially sped up, the pieces look light and are easy to handle. That plate alone is about 20 kilograms. When I moved the 2 sides bolted together from the garage to the finishing room, it was right on the limit of what I could carry comfortably, maybe 60 kilos. Anyway, if someone doesn't like this plate in the future, it's easily removed by undoing 4 screws. One of the delays in working on this press was trying to find replacements for the gas system, especially the regulator. I spent months looking for an equivalent replacement and new hoses with the right fittings. In the end, I decided to just test the old components and cross my fingers. I hooked everything up to a cylinder and pressurized it with the final valve closed, and then sprayed everything with soapy water to look for leaks. This is a standard test for leaks. There were none, so I decided to open the valve and light the burners, and it worked fine. So, for now, I'm just using the old hose and regulator. I would like to replace the hose in the near future. For now, I'll be careful to not leave it unattended under pressure. Of course, I wanted it to work first time, but nothing ever works first time. I started with a yellow foil that activates at a lower temperature. It worked second go. First go was too cold. Then I moved to a fake gold foil. With the yellow, because I thought the temperature was a bit low, because I was impatient, I'd used an unusually long dwell time. Kiss and off is usually enough, but I was doing maybe 2 seconds. This long dwell was much too long for the gold foil, and the second go with the brief dwell worked perfectly. I'm very happy with how this blocking press has scrubbed up. I love how it heats up faster than my electric-powered presses. If you have any information about Marshall presses, even diagrams or photos in old bookbinding or printing machinery catalogues, I'd love to hear from you. Considering how common they are, there's not much historical information about them. A current company does still seem to use the name, but I don't think they have anything to do with the original company. I'm working on 2 more of my Marshall presses, and the one I'm anxious to get working is the smaller one with the foil feeder. I was hoping to make Christmas cards with it, but I'm running out of time. The big press is a massive job, and I'm not sure how long that will take. It weighs near 700 kilograms, and individual parts are difficult to handle by myself. And if you're wondering, I have 4 Marshall presses and the big horseshoe Krauser, and I'm open to acquiring more historic blocking presses, especially Marshalls. I promise no more shorts showing off my hairy legs in future videos. My son helped with some video work near the beginning, which resulted in some of the funky camera work. If you'd like to give the gas-fired Marshall a go, let me know and we can arrange a time for you to visit the bindery and try it out. If I don't see you in person beforehand, until next time, cheerio.